Good afternoon, Aristo.
Good morning, Ron. It seems to be 4:10 over here, and it's probably 9:10, close to 9:11 where you are.
Oh, wow. Is it weird over there like it has been here?
As I said in the first take, yes, very weird, for me at least. Everybody else is now admitting that it's weird, and they don't feel natural at all. Most people cannot explain it in any kind of natural sense, and most people are actually finding physical reasons, you know. Basically just look at the sky and you see all these chemtrails that were never there before. And you talked about the welfare state in your previous video, and I was just wondering how much money it costs to make all the crap that they throw at us. You know, tons and tons of stuff all over the world that are chemical combinations and who knows what else, made in laboratories. Where do they make this stuff? What kind of humongous containers do they have to contain it? And, you know, and this is all from our tax dollars, all from that money.
You know, the interesting thing about that video that I thought of afterward, that all this money that goes to the corporate welfare, to Boeing and all these other big companies, that doesn't even include the military-industrial complex crap. I don't think. I don't think Boeing is military-industrial complex. They're just the largest airplane manufacturer in the world, as far as I know.
Oh, they got military contracts too.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
They are, you know, it's anybody who has a military contract is military-industrial complex, but at the same time, behind those is the so-called technocracy, as they say. So they're all planners. And it's funny because people are conditioned. You have the liberals and the conservatives in the U.S., for example. And like you said, the conservatives are against welfare, helping their fellows, unless it's some religious, moral type of thing, and all for giving to the military, giving to corporations. At the same time, the liberals are against guns, they're against self-defense, they're against any kind of personal initiative, and they're all for being subservient to the state. And it's almost like the con job is separated into two factions so people can hold their illusions and say, oh yeah, you know.
We have a choice.
You have a choice, exactly. And we have different choices, and the other guys over there are keeping you from making your choice. So it's a very, you might say it's a well laid out plan or a smart plan, but it really isn't. I mean, growing up, you notice how some people are very clever in a certain way. It's how they think. It's all they think. And they cannot be creative or anything. All they can do is come up with these sneaky little plans how to screw somebody. Because that's, for whatever reason. I mean, you mentioned in your last video about, you talked to an Indonesian friend of yours, and he was telling you to stay neutral, and these people are basically playing a role. And on the surface, any behavior is a role, if you consider the deeper spiritual truth of what's at the core. But the point is, how many people actually embody that truth? I mean, to a mystic, a rock has a soul. But it still might fall off the mountain and hit you on the head and crush you. So, you know, you don't get angry at the rock because it crushes you. It's playing a role. But that kind of phrase, when it's applied to human psychology, can also be misleading, and it can also be disempowering.
Absolutely.
I mean, we tend to excuse people. How about the victims? I mean, you say, well, they're playing a role, so that means they're not really in pain. And so the perpetrators are playing a role, so they're not really causing pain. They're not being sadistic. They're not responsible for their actions. And in a way, there is something to it. I tend to look at it as follows. They're sick, you know. So somebody who's sick is not... Cancer cells are sick. But what does nature do with cancer cells? What does the body do? It dissolves them, and it consumes them. It digests them. And it eliminates any kind of waste. It doesn't go take them someplace to be rehabilitated and return them back to put them in the body. Psychopaths are people, but psychopathy is an affliction. And if we can separate the affliction from the psychopath, that's one thing. You wanted to say something?
Well, what does Paul Levy call it? Wetiko or something like that? Is that what? I know you've read Paul Levy's material.
Yes, the wetiko, I think, or wetiko.
Okay, how you are just pronouncing the same word differently.
Yeah. So that's a Native American evil spirit. And this is interesting that you mentioned it, because when we do our little talks and when you talk, we realize we're talking to almost like two separate groups of people. And sometimes in the same person, you have two separate tendencies. You have the spiritual-metaphysical type of tendency, and you have the pragmatic, earthy, normal tendency. And it's very, very difficult to integrate those two. Even in the same person, it's very difficult. And some people come up, one commentator said, okay, if you do mantras, for example, Sanskrit mantras are going to make you feel better, and they do. But in my experience, that requires a hell of a lot of commitment and training. It's not just going out and doing a mantra or any kind of spiritual practice. There are degrees of commitment, and most people aren't even aware. And even if you are aware, you can end up going through the motions of some kind of elaborate, ritualistic, I don't know what, that doesn't do much. The conventional way or how it's presented. Spirituality has been repressed for so long in humanity that even what's out there, as I've said in previous videos, even mystics have difficulty communicating and bridging the gap between the so-called normal or common state of awareness and perspective and paradigm and the more metaphysically oriented. Even the word metaphysical, it's not metaphysical. It's basically a deeper form of physicality, a deeper reality sense, a deeper experience. And that Paul Levy says that in the sense that he defines the affliction of psychopathy, like I said, as a participatory delusional syndrome, something like that. And I mentioned this in the last talk we had. So we, like you say in your videos, we need to participate more, we need to feel more, and we need to be able to discern more, because participation is an exercise that leads to discernment. It is our first form of doing, not acting upon something to manipulate it so much, and not being passive and not touching it for the sake of neutrality, but participating in a balanced manner. And the only way you can really participate honestly is to be honest, is to participate from where you are, in according to what your beliefs are, what your heart tells you. So if I'm going to talk to the pragmatic people, I'll say, look, advice has been given time and time again as to how to deal with this crazy situation, at least in terms of rudimentaries. And you have something in your on your Facebook page that says food for thought. I did not write this. It's one of those articles down there in the importance section, and it has 10 steps on how to deal with the conditioning, with the crisis. Some of these things I agree with, some of these things I don't. For example, stocking up on food and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not really that type of person. But other people, understandable. So food for thought is exactly that. Food for thought, not just food for thought, but food for feeling, food for participation. I mean, everybody thinks, and they think chaotically or organized or rigidly, but food for participation. Everything is food for participation. Participation is the integration of being and doing. What Heather was talking about, these are two separate things, but if you want to bring the both and condition of them, I would call it participation. You cannot participate without being, and you cannot participate without doing in some form. So what I've always tried to do was, if the psychos throw something at me, I realize that whether they're attacking me or trying to brainwash me or trying to make me complacent or whatever their stimulus is, it's still a form of conditioning. And I kind of act like a little kid in a sense of instinctively, I want to do something different than what they're throwing at me. I want to do it differently. I want to think differently. I want to feel differently from what the norm is. And only in order to do this, we need to basically nourish ourselves with that food for participation. Everything in our environment can either be, even this weird state of awareness. I mean, personally, I think it's malignant. I mean, in the sense that I don't think, oh, this is just a change, so just write it. No, if you just write it, then you can automatically fall into a groove of what's being done to you. And it can take you into a conclusion you don't like. Participating with something is like driving a car on a road. And a road that has many branch-off points, many intersections, so you choose your path. If you drive your car and let go of the steering wheel, you're going to crash. Or you can let the state come in and put an automatic navigator in your car and you take the back seat. You know. So I urge people to look at things differently and take what you might take seriously where they are, where their starting point is. Some people can't do anything more than the financial, political direction. They consider everything else unrealistic, and that's fine. However, they need to understand that the area where they don't feel they can participate is not an area where they can come to a definite conclusion of, well, that's just bullshit. They have to say, I don't know. That's rational, it's pragmatic, we've said it again and again, and it's not something that weakens us. I mean, you see this on the internet, on forums. People try to push you into a position where you say, I don't know, and then they say, well, I do, so now you lost the argument or whatever. Where I don't know is it's actually a strength. I don't know. One person in some New Age book wrote that it's actually like being at the top of a pyramid where all the forces come to a point. Because you don't know and you don't have a definite conclusion, then everything around you comes and greets you, and you can actually digest it and assess it and make a choice. You don't have to know for sure. Proof is a concept that's very ambiguous. I mean, as we've said before, and we repeat these things because, in my opinion, they're important. Proof cannot be done to anybody's, half the stuff that science claims, and the reason that we believe it is because science is ritualized. People wear their white lab coats, have their PhDs, go to all of these symposiums, and there's all kinds of fiction around the scientific thing. It's turned into a priesthood, and that's why we believe them. It's not because they've proven anything. Other scientists will say, well, that's not proven, and they throw it around. Nothing is proven, really.
Well, they speak as authority.
Exactly.
And they claim to be that, and people buy their bullshit.
Exactly. And
I'm not an authority.
Exactly. And that goes to your last video, because all authority is accompanied by ceremonial. When you see ceremonial, a uniform, a certain salute, a way of talking that's different than other people, a certain vocabulary, symbols, then you notice somebody is telling you what to do and is accompanied by all of these things, that's authority in the sense of the Matrix. Because those symbols are brainwashing media. They are there to hypnotize you and to archetypally stimulate you to assume what is not really there. So the authority is not proving anything. You got this person saying, I'm the king and you have to obey me, or else my soldiers are going to kill you. And the people say no, where there's more of us than there is of you. I don't care how many of your soldiers are. We say no. But then there's the ceremonial. There's the hymn to the Republic. There's all the parades. There's the fancy crown. There's the gold and the jewels. All of these have energies. There's the mythology of the king. We grow up with fairy tales about princesses and princes. Everything grabs us by the nuts, whether we're men or women, and squeezes tightly and takes away our passion. And they cannot take away our passion anymore so much as they used to in the past, because we've been so conditioned and manipulated that we've almost become immune to it in a sense. We haven't realized that we're almost immune to conditioning. What Brzezinski said, that it's far easier to kill 1 million people than it is to convert them, is actually a conclusion. That's why they're going through their big depopulation. It doesn't work anymore. It's temporary. It's run its course. So our threat is really not so much a new system. They have, they're trying to push all these new systems and all of this and deceive us. But really, we're a lot wiser than we think. They're just trying to convince us that we're much more stupid than we feel. You know, especially with all the crap they're throwing at us. That, you know, they do that in institutions for the mentally insane. They feed them full of drugs so they can't think. Not so they're gonna. Most of these people are not dangerous, but they keep everybody medicated and like zombies. And if anybody looks at them, they'll say, "Oh, these people are seriously brain damaged. They can't even, you know, put two words together." And it's because of the drugs. So they're convinced that they're far more crazy than they are. Or you know, most people in the past, like in the 50s, if you didn't conform and if you had any kind of psychic sense, you were put in an institution. And if you were put in an institution, you were then medicated and electroshock therapy, and you were put into that framework of being crazy and convinced.
Well, Paul Levy went through that. I mean, I remember some of his story from
really?
Past. I mean, his parents thought he was nuts. He actually was institutionalized in his younger years, and still there's members of his family that don't that think he's nuts. I mean, to this day, I'm pretty sure.
I can relate to that, you know, and it's been very, very, it's almost been a karmic fear of mine of being institutionalized, of, oh, I sense all these things, I better keep my mouth shut, you know, and I was somebody who always had a big mouth, always liked to speak my mind and talk and communicate. So it was, you know, to this day I have body tensions that relate to that kind of thing. And it's a kind of mental torture because, and we have learned to do this with each other. There's almost no greater sneaky way that a psychopath gets you to submit than to actually allow you to be your own little psychopath in your life. You know, to actually give you an option. Well, you can manipulate people too. You can become powerful like me in your little arena. You can be the boss.
They're known as law enforcement officers.
Yeah, petty tyrants, that's another word, you know. They encourage petty tyranny, so we're all on the internet bitching at each other and pounding at each other, and if we don't eat meat or if we meet or whatever, but nobody dares go up to a banker and bitch. Nobody dares, you know, write a letter to anybody in authority, not that they'll care or anything, but really make a voice and point a finger at specifics that are not just corporate groups like Jesuits or Zionists or I don't know what, or Templars. You know, all of these things are names, corporate names that psychopaths have taken upon themselves in order to hide behind. Just like the kings. Most kings, you know, they tell us stories about the emperors and the great conquerors, but most kings were figureheads. They had all their fiats and all their decadence and all of this, but even in Rome, you know, whatever the emperor said and did, you had the people around the emperor who influenced them. You had the senators. If any emperor went against the Senate, like Caligula, for example, this guy, the people loved him. Now, this guy is the big archetype of the insane emperor. However, there are historical views that say it's possible that he wasn't the insane emperor. He lowered taxes. He's the only one that did. He did not create wars. The people loved him. He actually helped the common people. His gripe was with the Senate and with the royal family and with the elite because they killed his family. You know, they murdered everybody he knew, and he was the last one, so he went crazy on them and really became the demon that they were to everybody else. And so history made this guy, you know, the Praetorian Guard killed him off because the Senate said enough is enough. You know, they did the same thing with Julius Caesar, because they thought they didn't need an emperor, and even that changed eventually. But the point is that it's heresy, the greatest heresy, even in the greatest crime in medieval Europe was regicide, killing the king or going against the king. Now, unless you were one of the king's cronies, you didn't give a shit, you know. If you were one of the family or the elite yourself, killing a king was fine. But for the people, revolution against the authority, you know, go kill yourselves as much as you want. Go argue amongst yourselves as much as you want. But do not just question authority, but do not dare go against it. And these days, we know better because in order to control us even more, they had to create revolutions. They had to reverse the medieval mindset of going against the king and actually take the pent-up rage of the people. They did that in France, you know, and turn it against. And so regicide... Exactly. And all of the revolutions that followed, they all came back to back, and it isn't a coincidence. These people realized that scientific progress was going to give them a war machine, and they couldn't burn people at the stake for scientific discoveries anymore. They had to let as soon as the Protestant Reformation occurred, and that's very interesting, because Martin Luther did something very similar to what Heather proposed. The guy tacked on notices of saying, I hereby declare the Pope void, his power is void and null, he's anti-God. He posted these all over the place. He just made courtesy notices of sorts. And this is what started the notices themselves, the only thing they didn't, the Pope didn't care. He brought up the Inquisition, he made all these counter-Reformation things. The Catholic Church didn't just submit to those courtesy notices from Martin Luther and his friends. It was everybody else who took heart. All the other people who were sick of the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church was saying, you're not going to get to heaven unless you pay us. It was a racket, an extortion racket. Still is, But in those days, they figured we don't have any more crusades, where we're going to get our money. So it was basically, they started getting more and more bold, shall we say. But the point is that the psychopaths themselves turned against or extracted from their old establishment thing and created a new one. Because science, the Catholic Church was going against scientists, but then scientists were the ones making all the war weapons. Leonardo da Vinci invented the hand grenade. And cannons came out and all of these, and you saw nobility started shifting from being knights in shining armor and these muscular warriors into these dandies with wigs and powdered noses, that were dancing all kind of weird, strange court dances and stuff. Because they didn't have to wear the armor. They could come out and say, we don't have to be manly kings or anything. You're going to obey us, and we're going to be the most ridiculous-looking thing on the face of the planet. And so they change, and they make us change. And this is a momentum that's very, very difficult to transform. And now they have this other thing. They are under the illusion that they don't need to brainwash us anymore, even though they're constantly pumping a lot of money into us. So we're in a transition where they're half brainwashing us and they're half poisoning us. And it's a very strange thing, because anything that they throw at us, they're inhaling too. I don't care what kind of antidotes they give themselves, it's still Big Pharma. Big Pharma does not have all the great technologies for the elite and all the good drugs for them, and gives us all the bad drugs. They don't know anything about how the body operates. They are functioning in a psychopathic manner, and when you work for a psychopath, you are not free to create as you are inspired to create. You have to obey orders. And they come and say, why didn't you make the discovery yet? We're going to kill you, and you're out, we're going to bring the next one in to make the discovery. So you become a yes man. And it's a really bizarre situation that's going on, because, when we talk about the timelines, like I said, they don't want timeline 2 either. They don't want timeline 1, they want timeline 1.5. And we want timeline 3, which is the integration of timelines 1 and 2. 1 and 2 are basically, it's not an either-or situation. You cannot, choose one or the other, because there's going to be an antagonism always between them. So they want to take a sample from the two and eliminate, they want to destroy the 90% of 2 timelines. And as Bill Brockbrader said, these timelines are actually a confluence of probabilities that are twisting like a bunch of threads coming together to create a rope. And, all of the bad ones are coming into one thing, a current, and all of the good ones into another current. And we're taking these 2 condensed ropes and bringing them together. What they want to do is take a sample out of each rope for themselves and polarize them, hyperpolarize them, and stay in the middle, because they don't want life to exist without death. They want to be sowers and grim reapers, but immortal at the same time. And so they need sacrifices, and that is how a cancer operates. They need to consume. They want to consume this planet and live under their dome cities until they can establish their spaceships and go out, and then they're going to start consuming the universe. that is
They'll
the
never
face.
make it.
Well, it's the face of insanity. And they know that, but they have no choice as far as they're concerned. And for me, unless we play our role, which is to consume them, they are not going to start playing their role. They are, in that sense, as many say, out of control. So to step back and to allow them to play their role is not the way it works. Our role is to stop their role, because they're not going to do it. So I urge people, I was going to talk about a metaphysical topic today, but I'll save it for the next video. The point is that find out where you are in terms of your belief system, in terms of how you're willing to participate. Forget being and doing is two separate things. Find out where you are and then open up to receive what you can resonate with and see where that gets you. If it's not good enough, then that means you need to expand your horizons. And you can't say, no, that's not true, or that you need to be willing to change in some way if it's not good enough. If it is good enough and you say, well, that's me, that's as far as I can go, then that's fine. Just do not betray yourself. You don't want to betray yourself. That's why we're honest with ourselves. So this food for thought stuff is much deeper. Use it as a meditation. If you don't go into spiritual and whatever, that would be your meditation. You know, all of these pieces of advice, what do they really mean? Do you really want to hoard food? Do you really want to have guns? What would that mean for you? How do you really address the mind control? Can you see it everywhere? Can you experience it? You know, use your mind in a spiritual manner if you don't really believe in spirituality. If you do believe in spirituality, you know, why would you want to reject the world or go into a phase that has nothing to do with physical reality and spout certain platitudes that, are you sure neutrality is understood in a pragmatic way? Are you sure the role-playing paradigm, is that understood in a pragmatic way? Or is there something in it that actually makes us powerless? Do you feel your passion dampened with all these spiritual platitudes? Is it almost like you're being reprimanded, like your preacher or your teacher is telling you that you're, please, you know?
Well, that's not what I felt when I got some of the recent, a couple of weeks ago, I guess it's been almost 2 weeks ago now, that I got communication from certain segments of the delegation, and I felt like I was being reprimanded.
How would your grandson feel?
My grandson, by the way, the dynamic between me and him is really changing, because he still shows the belligerence every now and again, but he usually lets it go in less than a minute when I say, I don't treat you like that. I talk to you nice. And he drops it.
Because the shadow is waking up in that sense. That's a wonderful way to speak to the shadow. And it's almost like, but if you told somebody, a spiritual person, then they're a master at that kind of, you know, back and forth, and they bring a different kind of reprimand on you. You know, what if you combine, you know, because they put you in the position of your grandson. And so, but you know better at the same time. You know that your grandson is within you, that kind of inner child but the grandson the inner child, the belligerent self, it has a reason for being belligerent, because they're being reprimanded. We're not children. And when you say something to somebody like that, on the one hand, you don't need to reprimand yourself if you say something like that. But the point is, the other person needs to feel that you're on equal terms, that there's actually a golden rule operating. So why is that intimidation there? Why is that feeling of being reprimanded there? Because there's something at the emotional level that is not recognized at the intellectual level. And spiritual people tend to sideline the emotional level, the desire level. And I am always suspicious of that. I don't care how holy the face is, what the background is, whatever. When the emotional and the emotional levels, it's almost masked that it's not sidelined by using the higher emotions, the acceptable ones. The emotions that are allowed to ride in the front of the bus and the other ones have to go in the back. You know, there's a sort of segregation, emotional segregation going on. then you can say, well, my aggression is a role too, so why don't you go to the bankers and tell them to stop their role, or whatever. The point is that honoring that sense of feeling intimidated is very important because it has a lesson to teach. And what that is, participation will reveal. Okay, I don't want to go into, I don't even know how long, 40 minutes, so I think...
It's only 30.
It's 30.
It's 31 minutes, a little bit less. I have a title that I came up with. The last week I took notes as you were talking. And I like doing it that way because I felt that my blurb was much more reflective of what you actually talked about last week than it sometimes is. And this time I came up with a title, Participatory Syndrome, or Participatory Delusional Syndrome of the Matrix.
Exactly.
How does that sound to you?
Oh, we've covered. I couldn't even begin to give you a title. I mean, I'm amazed that you could come up with these things. But it's basically a general idea because, from what you said in your previous videos, we can extract from the previous stuff we said in the last discussion. Participation is very, very important. And if somebody reprimands you, whether they intend it or not, your response, viewed in the context of participation, leads to transformation all the time. And when we feel fear, we're actually participating. The problem is when we're blocking the fear, or when we're feeling the anxiety of our blocks crumbling. We're trying to push away that fear. And sometimes when somebody intimidates you, they are resisting the fear that is imposing on them. Because one thing that the psychopaths are projecting on us is if we are hostile to them, we're going to be punished. Something bad is going to happen. It's not spiritual, it's not right, it's not kingly, I don't know what. But part of that is a conditioning, and it's very, very ingrained. And only participation can spread the curtain, so to speak, can let us observe behind the veil.
Well, I think the denial is the type of resistance that will persist. When you're operating from a place of denial, you are actually in resistance. And what you're resisting there, of telling the truth about things, that will persist until you get it. I really believe that's, to me, that's the way life works.
Admitting the truth to yourself,
right.
Because to tell the truth to a person who is in denial themselves, without having participated with the truth that because the truth will change you. It may not immediately set you free, but it will bring you to a place where you can participate toward your own freedom. And this is the hardest thing about denial, or the most sure thing, is that it's much easier to point out in other people than it is in ourselves. It's okay to speak in the third person, but second and first person is almost out of the question. Second person will get you in an argument for sure. But,
well, thank you, Aristo, for another stimulating conversation, and we look forward to the next one. And I hope I come up with a title and a blurb that works. Maybe it'll change between now and the time of actually posting it. But,
this is a good one, I think. It'll probably get Paul Levy's attention too, and it's also something because people they take too many things for granted. We all take too many things for granted. A spiritual truth goes, oh, that feels so good, and then we ride the wave of the good feeling and we don't work with it. And then it comes back around, oh, please help me, heal me, tell me the truth, give me more advice, And I'd like to drive, what does participation mean? It's so simple, and yet it's so deep. We can always go deeper. And not to keep you anymore, thank you for hearing me out today. And namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.
Till next time.